Howdy YouTube, today we're taking a look at who made the better wrestling figure, Jakks or Mattel. Both are fantastic figures. They have their hit and misses, both waves, both series, both manufacturers. They've both got similar accessories, similar title belts. I'm going to try and take a look at all of it for you today. There are a heap of figures that you can compare, but I've tried to narrow it down to some of the ones I think will be the closest comparison that I've got in my collection. Review them for you guys and give you an indication of who is better, Jakks or Mattel. Now, for the purpose of this review, I'm going to try and keep it fairly even and fairly unbiased. So I'm comparing figures that are very similar. But of course, Jakks, I've got an R3 Jakks, then one of the other earlier style Jakks figures, and then also the deluxe aggression style Jakks. With Mattel, I've got the basic, the elite, and the defining moment. So I've tried to keep it reasonably even and have one from each of the main waves. I'm not including the Jakks Deluxe series that they did for TNA and also WWE towards the end of their run, just because they're much bigger figures and they don't really compare well to the standard 6-inch style figure. Okay, now the first comparison I've got is Mick Foley, better known as Mankind. Two very similar figures, but also very different. It is the same character. One is the Jakks Legends Mick Foley. The other is obviously Elite. I think it's 44 or 34 basic series Mankind. Both are really cool figures. I love both of these. If we break it down, they've got the exact same articulation. They've both got ball-jointed heads, ball-jointed arms. This one actually has ball-jointed ankles, but normally ball-jointed elbows. Normally, though, they've all got the same swivel in the bicep, swivel in the wrist, swivel in the legs, knees, boots, and ankles. But it varies slightly here, but that's generally the same articulation you get with both brands. Now, having said that, if I had to pick one, I'm going with the Jakks, the Legend Series one over here, for a couple of reasons. One, I think the paint app is significantly better. Mattel has gone for a much more cartoony kind of look, which is okay. I always preferred the more realistic version of the characters and of the wrestlers. But having said that, there are a lot of Mattel figures that have got a great mix between like that realistic look and also the cartoonish type style that they go for. Sizing obviously is another big problem as well. One of Jakks' biggest criticisms was scale. That's something Mattel has been fantastic with. And that means that if you get a Jakks Mankind and you compare them to a Jakks Triple H, they're the same height. If you get a Mattel Mankind and a Mattel Triple H, they're significantly different. So that's a plus for Mattel's corner. Honestly though, if I bring it forward so you guys can take a look, I think the face on the Jakks is significantly nicer. That's one of the things Jakks always managed to do a really good job with, was their face scans. You can even see on the Mankind the two-toned hair paint. I think that looks brilliant as well. Also, I love the smiley face tie. So in this case, if you had to give it based on face sculpt and detail, I'm going with Jakks. Okay, next we're comparing X-Pac. Now, these are two different figures. Yes, I know one is DX, one is NWO. The reason I'm comparing them is because they've both got the same head scan, so that's pretty cool. One thing I think is really awesome, the old school Jakks style figures scale perfectly. Like, check that out. That's the exact same as the Mattel X-Pac. Obviously, this one being an Elite has a lot more articulation. The ball jointed head, arms, the ab crunch, swivel in the thigh, double bend at the knee, swivel in the boot, etc. But both are really cool examples of the differences between these figures. Obviously, the Mattel, I think, has got a much better skin tone. I'll bring it forward so you guys can take a look at the face. It is the exact same face mold, but two different approaches. One's slightly more cartoony, being the Mattel. The other, obviously, the Jakks, a little bit more realistic. The hair on the Jakks, I think, looks a lot nicer, but the bandana and just the general face sculpt on the Mattel, I think is, I don't know, it looks a lot better. I think they pulled it off in a much smoother way than Jakks did. Okay, next up we've got the Mattel DX Triple H and Jakks DX Triple H. If I had to pick one out of these two, I'm going for the Jakks, and I'll explain why. The Triple H, the head scan's pretty good. I'll bring it forward so you guys can see. They're both really awesome head scans. I can't knock Mattel for that. The detail on the Triple H is really good. For some reason with the Mattel figures, at least with the basics, the hair feels a lot cheaper and looks a lot cheaper. Like the Jakks, I think just the different layers of paint and the different color schemes that they've got in there really add a lot of value to the figure, and that's something that goes a long way, particularly if you're a collector and you're trying to decide which is better for the purposes of this video. Having said that, it is a nice Triple H face. The biggest thing that gets me though is the body. Now for me, Triple H has always had that big muscular build. That's something I think the Jakks does really well. Even though the Mattel has much better height, you compare the arm size, Triple H has got these scrawny little chicken arms, which just doesn't fit the Triple H character. You know, he's got those big biceps, he's got the abs as well, and there's just something about the Mattel one that I think looks way too skinny to accurately reflect Triple H's build. Other than that though, I mean the faces are fairly good. I think the Jakks though has got a lot better detail, and the scaling on the Jakks is a lot better too with the size of the body. Now again, every figure I'm using in the comparison portion of this video, you can actually see I've reviewed individually on my channel. Next up though, we've got the Heartbreak Kid, Shawn Michaels, WrestleMania 14, and then the Ringside Collectibles exclusive Jakks, Shawn Michaels. Both are brilliant figures. It's very hard to pick between this. You can see again, scaling, spot on, both the same size, both great detail on the tattoos, both I think have really good head sculpts. If I turn it around so you guys can see, again, the Jakks has much better detail on the hair, but then again, the Mattel, this is certainly one of the nicer ones. You can see the braids and everything there. Both come with really cool entrance gear, which is always handy. For some reason, I think the Jakks figures, the entrance gear that they come with is a lot nicer, and the main reason why is that's, you know, like a soft cloth type material, which generally is a little bit more expensive than your plastic. Having said that though, both have great detail. The only problem I have with the Mattel one is that they haven't continued the chest hair all the way through. And I know that they did bring out a variant that had the full chest hair, but why wouldn't you just bring them all out accurately like Shawn Michaels is? Anyway, if I had to pick between these two, this one is a little bit subjective. I'm going with the Jakks Ringside Collectibles exclusive one, just because for me, I prefer the bulkiness of it. The Shawn Michaels looks a little bit lean, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's got the accurate chest hair, and also I love the stubble on the Shawn Michaels Jakks, and the hair I think is a little bit nicer also. Next up, we've got Chico, the bad guy, Razor Ramon. We've got the NWO Ringside Collectibles exclusive, and then also the Jakks Federation Poison exclusive Scott Hall. Hands down, the Mattel, even the Defining Moments Razor Ramon, I think are some of the best figures Mattel have produced. You can compare it to the R3 Jakks. All of the R3 Jakks scale brilliantly with the Mattel, and hopefully you've seen that. And then with the Ruthless Aggression, it's a little bit hit and miss depending on the wrestler and the character. But a good example of the similarities and differences there. The Jakks is fantastic. Keep in mind that it is like 15 years older than the recently released Ringside Collectibles exclusive Scott Hall, but you can see it's just a much nicer figure. Jakks tended to reuse a lot of the same parts, and whilst Mattel does that, they do include, I think, a lot more details with their premium line of figures, and that's always good. Last but not least, Undertaker. Hands down, Mattel make a much better Undertaker figure. The faces are actually very similar. You can see the difference in scale. Mattel, a lot more accurate. The detail on the tattoos and everything on the arms as well looks a lot nicer on the Mattel, whereas on the Jakks it tends to look just like green scribble, if I'm completely honest. Again, Defining Moments compared to a basic, so I guess it's a little bit unfair in that respect, but both have pretty much the exact same head scan. Mattel in this case, I think, did a much better job with the Undertaker, and that's definitely a plus for me. Differences in the IC belts, the tag belts, European belts. Overall, when it comes to belts, it's actually pretty even. It comes down to personal preference.